Everybody, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, happy Monday, or whatever day it is for you. We're so glad that you're here. This is Spirit Matters, and we're coming at you live from New York. We're doing this live. My name is Dal Garunga, and I'm here with a live Zoom studio audience, and I happen to be joined by person in the other room, Rasika Gopi, my good wife, the one who tolerates me on a daily basis. You guys only have to tolerate me Monday through Friday. She tolerates me 7 days a week. So she's our guest for this week. And good morning. Hi.
Hello from the other room.
Hello from the other room. I would ask you how you're doing, but I already know, but you can let our guests and our wonderful audience know how you're doing.
I'm doing well. Spring is in the air, so that's always a good feeling to come out of the dark, wintry days. So March, I think we've made it through the worst of it. So I'm feeling good in that sense. I'm a little nervous. I've never done this podcast. I don't think I've ever tuned in live. So the first time I'm tuning in live, I'm a guest. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I've always tuned in just because I'm sitting on the couch next to you, but yeah, here I am. I'm so excited to be with you all today, and yeah, kind of nervous, kind of excited, and yeah, just so happy to see all your happy faces.
Well, here we go. I was first of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I was leading up to this kind of posting online a little bit. What are some things that people wanted us to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we just get right into it. What do you think, Kimberly? Should we just dive in?
Let's dive in deep.
Let's dive in deep. Okay. That's what I said when we met. I was like, you ready for this ride? And we're like, here we go.
That's the only way we do it.
That's the only way we do it. Okay. So first on our list here, there's a number of things that people had sent to us. They wanted us to talk about. A lot of them were relationship related because, we're such experts. We've conquered relationships and we are now the gurus. No, that's not true. We are still finding our way, figuring it out. And I think that's what a lot of this podcast is in general, is us figuring things out together. We've got spiritual principles, we've got spiritual guidelines that are given to us. And then it's like, no plan of, excuse me, I cough a lot on this show. I'm sorry.
I know you do.
No plan of attack survives first contact with the enemy, so to speak. You got your spiritual plan, and then all of a sudden it's like life hits you and it's like, how does this all apply? And I think that in relationships, a lot of it is the same way also, that we saw a comedy, we saw like a comedy show, like we didn't see it. We were watching this comedian. And at a certain point, he just said the line that we always say to ourselves, we're all just doing our best here. He told this story that's like almost like this embarrassing story of himself. And at a certain point, he had to qualify and just said, we're all just doing our best here. That's what we tell ourselves often.
And I think that's what marriage is at the bottom line. It's like a commitment to just try to do your best with the other one for life, and just stay with it. That's also a motto that we have: stay with it through all the thick and thin and keep coming back to it. I know Radhanath Swami once said to us that marriage is about endlessly forgiving. And I think that from one perspective, that sounds like, that sounds exhausting and hard, and doesn't set marriage up in the best light. But it's also actually such a beautiful thing, because you get to be in this container, this partnership with someone that that they'll always offer you that forgiveness when you mess up unconsciously, unintentionally, and when your ego comes out, when your shortcomings, your flaws kind of cause tension and issues, and just to know that the other person is always going to stay with it and always going to offer you that grace and generosity of forgiveness. It's the greatest gift of marriage, because all other relationships you can kind of hit the easy button and eject from. It's in, we even with like, in now more than ever, you see like and I don't necessarily agree with this, but like, you know, people distancing themselves from family, like their parents, their siblings, but also, you know, you have falling out with friends, and sometimes it doesn't have to get to that point. Yes, it might come to like a toxic point where, you know, for your own self-respect and boundaries, but you know, I think with marriage, it's a beautiful thing because like you're really forced to stay with it and make it work. And if you do, there's so much beauty on the other side, so much more depth of love, so much more understanding, and your ego does get purified through all of that, through just staying with it.
What's the hardest thing about being married to me? That's the question everybody wants to know. That's what everybody wants.
Oh God.
She's like, where do I start?
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, one of the I wasn't necessarily expecting you to answer that question. I was hoping that maybe you would say nothing, but clearly there's a lot that we need to talk about. One of the questions that I think, as you mentioned, because I think it relates to marriage. I think it's related to relationships in general. The idea of there was something when we were in India this past January. I don't know, were you there for Danya's talk?
Yes,
on
I was.
Bhakti? Yeah. And so a good friend of ours, Danya, we're going to have her on the show sometime in the coming weeks. I haven't scheduled it yet. But it was about Bhakti and relationships, and the idea that the soul is inbuilt for relationships. And sometimes we think that material relationships we need to be detached from, but actually it's the relationships of this world in which we almost like, it's like the training ground. It's like the training wheels of learning how to really love, as you were mentioning. And one of the questions that was here was that somebody had shared with us that thought would be good to start with is, how do you be in a relationship even when the honeymoon phase is over? How to choose love. And as you were speaking I was just thinking about Arjuna, and I was thinking about Arjuna and how he has such that incredible breakdown moment in the very, very beginning. And I think that sometimes when we come into relationships, very often we fall in love with the idea of people, and we present to people an idea of ourselves that we're hoping that they'll accept, and then based on those ideas, we create another idea of what a relationship is supposed to look like. And then a lot of energy and a lot of fear can drive not wanting to let that sort of fall apart. But I think you get those real spaces like Arjuna demonstrated in the first chapter of like, I'm going to have my complete, like, you're going to see the real me. You're with all like its ugly sides and its embarrassing sides and its vulnerable sides, and it's not going to look pretty. And it's not going to necessarily match the idea that we may have had for each other or our relationship. And what do we do in the face of that? And so I think that becomes almost like are you willing to go through that? Are you willing to not only like, are you willing to see the things you need to see about yourself in order to grow?
Yeah, and also just tying it back to Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield, something that comes to mind and is such a it's so foundational, and really the whole reason why the conversation can take place is because there's that deep trust in Krishna for him to guide him from the darkness of illusion to enlightenment. Like he can fully bare his soul and be vulnerable and be seen and kind of just like fall apart in front of Krishna because he has that trust in Krishna. And I think that that's another cornerstone for relationships to really work, is having that third person that is involved in all relationships, certainly in marriage, is Krishna, and always putting Krishna in the center of relationships and remembering that, but also seeing your partner as a guru, as a teacher, as that one that you can fully trust and be vulnerable, and to know that when you do fall apart and your darker sides come out and you're working through all the gunk in the heart, to trust that the other one is going to stay with it and can still hold you and be with you and stay with you through that, is so essential in that post honeymoon phase. And I think sometimes it can be shocking or jarring for people when they exit that honeymoon stage. But I think that's really where the relationship starts. The honeymoon phase, I think, just runs off of pure like hormones and adrenaline and just like, yeah, just a primal kind of attraction that like really anybody can experience with a variety of people, many people. But so so I would say that the relationship really does start when the honeymoon phase ends. And if you're not willing to be able to go there with vulnerability and then yeah, it can be challenging.
I was thinking that also in the relationship to the honeymoon phases of spiritual life also, because I think that a lot of us think that there's an idea in the same way that we think there's an idea of what relationships are supposed to look like. We have an idea of what our spiritual life is supposed to look like also. And I think that as long as we're approaching things, I remember reading an article at one point where the title of it is after getting married, I realized that marriage isn't for me. And like the you realize, and the assumption is that you think like, oh, this isn't for me. Therefore, like I realized, kind of like, when you return something at the store, like kind of realize that this sweater isn't really for me. Like, what's your reason for returning? I just realized it wasn't for me. Is there any defect? No, just realize it wasn't for me. But what actually, like, it was a play on words, is kind of like a hook to draw you in, that realizing it's not actually for me. It's not meant to be this place to satisfy my like needs, like my order supplier. It's actually the ground in which I get to learn to express giving and service and extending myself. Like it's actually for the other. And I think in spiritual life also, if I'm expecting spiritual life to just make my life comfy, cozy, and easy all of the time, then I'm naturally going to just kind of jump around from one thing to the other. Like as soon as discomfort hits, like if I hit the eject button as soon as discomfort hits, then I'm going to miss out on something that might be there waiting for me. I thought, we kind of jumped into it, but we were talking, I was thinking it might be nice to get to know you and your journey a little bit more. And if you wanted to share with people, because before you met me, you met Krishna, and you were on your own journey. And so maybe do you want to share with people a little bit about your coming to spiritual life, just even briefly? You're coming to spiritual life and what you were looking for and what that journey looked like for you.
Yeah, sure. So I was a seeker without realizing it. I went off to college, my first freshman year of college, left home thinking like many that a change of scenery, a new school with new people, a new state, a new environment would be what I needed to feel happiness and excitement. I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have the words to articulate it, but I was definitely dealing with a tremendous amount of anxiety. And so I was looking for answers without even really realizing it. And after 1 year of college and experiencing kind of like the average college life of, experiencing the parties and the drinking and the drugs and getting my fix of that, just after a year of that, feeling like this is not for me. This is not the answers. This is not bringing any answers. I feel more stressed out and anxious and depressed than ever and lost and confused than ever. And so that after returning from my freshman year, I had this instinct that I wanted to read. I don't know why. I think it was like just a seed that Krishna had in my heart, or like an inner nudge from Krishna in the heart to just read. And so I went to the bookstore and I came across two books that changed my life and started me on a spiritual journey. One was called Many Lives, Many Masters, and it opened me up to this idea that we've lived many lives and we take on the experiences and traumas and just the experiences, the traumas of past lives, and we carry them with us into present lives. And that blew me wide open to the concept of reincarnation. And then I read a second book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, which is kind of like this new agey book that talks about consciousness and presence and mindfulness. And that also changed my life because it opened me up to realizing that spirituality is where I needed to explore. That's what I needed to kind of discover this spiritual dimension of existence. I remember one of the quotes from the book that I remember the moment I was reading it, I was sitting on my couch at my parents' house and I just dropped the book and just looked up at the ceiling. They had these cathedral ceilings and the fan was running. And I just remember feeling my life lock into like another gear. It was like my whole world shifted. From that moment on, I was changed. The quote was something like, "What a relief to know that the voice inside my head is not me. Who am I then? I'm the one who witnesses it." And for me to get just that glimpse, even though it wasn't like realized, that knowledge that just opened me up to this new universe of seeing myself in the world. And so I started learning all about Buddhism and the concept of the mind, the nature of the mind and the ego, the three material modes of nature, and everything. It was like the highest truth I had ever encountered. I was raised Roman Catholic and I always had God consciousness was always part of my life, but I didn't know that God was the answer to all my problems. And really at that age, 19, I realized all my material problems, my existential crisis that I was experiencing was really rooted in a spiritual crisis of not knowing who I was. And so that's when I started asking those big questions of who am I? Why? What's the purpose of life? Where am I going? And shortly after like exploring Buddhism for some time, about 8 months, I came across a Bhagavad Gita study group on campus. And it was actually labeled as like a free yoga class and vegetarian dinner. And I had just become vegetarian from Buddhism, being inspired by the Buddhist path. And I was really disheartened by like the yoga classes I was experiencing on campus. They lacked any spiritual depth. I remember like the instructor at one of my first yoga classes was in the middle of like a sequence, said, "Okay, now we're going to get on the ground and do some crunches so we can look cute in our crop tops at the bar." And I just remember viscerally wanting to like throw up because I was coming to the yoga practice as I was coming from it from the angle of it being a spiritual practice and for it to be refining me on a spiritual level. And so this flyer I saw on campus for a free yoga class and vegetarian dinner seemed like it was a different style being offered by somebody off campus. And sure enough, it was, devotees on the bhakti path, and it ended up being the yoga of sound, as they put it, when I entered in with my yoga mat and yoga clothes. And I experienced my first kirtan, and they gave me japa beads and the Bhagavad Gita. And I was changed from that moment on because I had the background of Buddhism and these concepts of that are basically the same in our tradition. I took to it quite quickly. And so I remember reading the Bhagavad Gita like within a month and just soaking it all in and knowing that it was my path. And it finally had an answer to why I was so confused by the world. Because we really are like fish out of water. And I think some of us are sensitive to it, and others of us, I think, just go with the current of materialism and just lose ourselves. And we just Yeah, and it's so I feel so blessed that I had that level of sensitivity to the suffering of the world and myself and others, and just looking out of all the inequalities and just global crises, political, economic, environmental, and feeling overwhelmed by that. And instead of just trying to work within the system, just trying to coming across like a system of knowledge that helps me transcend it all together and see it all from a higher place. And not that, I've made peace with how the world is. That's a constant struggle to feel like, to be at peace with this world is so imperfect and flawed, but it gives that higher understanding of why it is and why there's such an urgency for self-illumination and self-development and self-realization, so that we can be lights in the world and bring some consciousness and some sanity to such a broken and lost and confused world. So that's my long-winded rant on how I'm here today.
And what was your first big spiritual challenge? Having kind of
Oh, wow.
discovered a new path, that like the gears in your life seemed to click. And then what was your first big spiritual challenge?
Well, I would say that it's kind of broad and all-encompassing, and something I still wrestle with today, and that is, you can understand all this spiritual truth that is so high and profound and esoteric, and but the application of it in those day-to-day, moment-to-moment life choices is so excruciatingly hard. It's very hard to apply because we have so much deconditioning to do. And I know for me, even to this day, like I feel that I have so far to go, and I, can still get triggered, and I still am not like equiposed in mind and vision. And so just dealing with the realities of the ego getting humiliated day in and day out. I feel like I don't let myself off the hook. I'm always overturning every rock possible. And so I think that the biggest challenge is just somehow being okay with being so imperfect and flawed and having such an ego, and still being somehow welcomed on the path and allowed to remain on the path. That's kind of more a theme of life, I would say. But the first challenge, yeah, I can't think of one specific moment. It's more just like getting knocked down by how much our ego can get in the way of us progressing. Because it is a simple path and a simple process. Srila Prabhupada would say that. But it's so hard to apply in the day-to-day moments. And I think that's why having those spiritual practice day in and day out to kind of develop that muscle and decondition yourself and develop the new healthy ways of moving in the world and relating with others is so essential, because it doesn't come naturally. Even though it's natural to the soul to be loving and compassionate and seeing with equal vision, I think just it's hard to practice day in and day out when you get when you come across certain situations or people. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do I make it easier or harder?
You
Maybe it depends on the day.
definitely make it easier.
I really appreciate what I would love to talk more about, but we're at time for today, so we're going to pull away some of our takeaways and get a couple closing words. Something that you mentioned, this idea of like allowed to be on the path. And I think that that's something that we can carry a lot with our self-judgment towards ourselves and towards others and towards circumstances of just like, because I think that's one of the greatest things that draws us to spiritual life and towards anything, towards a relationship, towards a career, towards a spiritual path, is a feeling like I belong. Like I belong here. Like this is for me. Like I remember one of the first times that like I when I started doing like yoga asana, and like there was a part of me that meant like I meant to teach this. And I've taught a little bit over time, but I realized that like actually it was less about like the teaching asana, but more about just like wanting to teach and to share. And there's like sometimes you get these experiences like this is where I meant to be, or this is where I belong, you know. And I think a lot of people here in Spirit Matters, you know, we've got what, like there's like 15 other people tuning in live with us right now, and most of them do it every single day. And it's like this is our family, this is where I belong. And so I think that that's the thing that draws us the most. And then there's the thing which scares us the most, is a sense of like I no longer belong here, like this isn't what I thought it was, or I'm no longer like qualified, or I'm not able to be here anymore, or I don't fit in anymore. And like those ego judgments start to come in and start to come almost like this self-sabotage of like I should leave. I will now excuse myself from the room. I wanted to dive into that more because I think that what I find is the hallmark of people that are able to keep going in spiritual life or keep going in a relationship is where they don't let the stories of the ego override and say you're too X, Y, and Z to make this happen. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I've seen you take that head on, and I've seen you grow tremendously with that, with yourself and with others. And it's something that you've shown me and that I continue to work on as well. And so that's something I appreciated among so many other things. There's lots of love coming up here in the chat. So many loves coming up here in our chats, and questions that we didn't get to, such as, what does it look like for you to keep Krishna in the center of your relationship? I think you're assuming something there, that we that we do that all the time. We try. But so we're going to turn it over to Kimberly, though. Kimberly is our wrap it up acharya here on the show. She pulls everything together for us and takes a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of takeaways we might just read here from the chat, but Kimberly's going to read some out for us. So if you want to take some notes and have some things to take away, tune in, and then we will share some closing words and take it from there. Send us on our way. What you got for us, Kimberly?
Stay with it. Be committed
Done.
to do
Stay
your
with it.
best. Yep. Put Krishna in the center. Relationships are the training grounds on how to really serve. See your partner as your teacher and someone to fully trust and be vulnerable with. Our problems are rooted in a spiritual crisis, and we're welcomed on the path even if we feel imperfect or flawed.
What's a closing word for you, Rasika? What are you taking away today?
A closing word?
No, just take away. What are you walking away with? What do you want to close with? What's your closer?
My closer is, just the importance to always, trying to see Krishna, or trying to see ourselves the way Krishna sees ourselves, and not judging us through the eyes of the ego, which is always going to either falsely build us up or falsely tear us down and make us feel either worthless or like the greatest. And both are not true, and both will lead to suffering and pain. And so just being okay with being good enough, and good enough is more than enough. And Krishna doesn't expect any type of performance or behavior or quality necessarily. He just wants us to keep staying with it, keep coming back, and he'll do all the purifying, and he'll take us home.
I really appreciate that also, because I think that seeing ourselves the way Krishna sees us, and also seeing other people the way that Krishna sees them, And I think that also becomes a big part of relationships. One of the questions Jenna Vatsala was asking is like, what does it mean to keep Krishna in the center of relationship? Part of it is trying to see somebody not as, like, as you said, their performance, like, what is this person doing for me, but what am I doing to support this person on their journey back towards Krishna? And that's what we're all meant to do for each other. And we're using this "stay with it" quote. It's something that we borrowed from Rumi. I'm just going to read the quote, and that can be our send off for today. There's a quote from Rumi that is a dialogue. It says, "I said, what about my eyes? He said, keep them on the road. I said, what about my passion? He said, keep it burning. I said, what about my heart? He said, tell me what you hold inside it. I said, pain and sorrow. He said, stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you." And so I think that, that's something that came up for us early on in our relationship when we hit our first big bumps, because we all hit bumps, whether it's in a relationship or spiritual life. And you can question, like, when life gets bumpy, we can wonder, like, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? But that actually, like, no, this is where we're meant to sometimes stay with it, because this is where the ego cracks. This is where the ego gets to crack, and I get to stop looking at myself the way that I have for so long, and start to see myself in a whole new light, which is the way that Krishna sees me. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you all so much. If you haven't already, we're always telling people, please go leave us 5-star review and write something. A lot of you have been leaving us 5-star reviews, which is great, but go on Apple Podcasts and write something. Leave a written review. We want to hear from you. And if you got more questions this week, things you want to ask us about, talk about this week, write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. And we would love to take your questions and your reflections and hear from you. Tell
And
us
it
what
doesn't have to be about relationships. Just
Doesn't
because
have to be
we're
about
married
relationships.
doesn't mean it has to be about. You
Yeah.
can find better people to talk about
We've got
marriage.
limited stuff. We're going to run out in about 10 minutes. We'll run out. We'll
We've
run
just
out
been
of
married
relationship.
8 years. It's not.
Yeah. Our advice is stay with it. That's all we got. White knuckle it and just hold it together. That's what we got. Outside of that, you might want to go check with.
Yeah, maybe 20 plus years. I think those are the people worth it to check
Yeah.
in with. I mean, we're happy also to share. There's definitely more that we can share, but it can, I was just wanting to invite people to ask more about other things as well.
Anything else? How to raise a puppy? We can give some tips on those kind of things, All right, guys, we love you all so much. Thank you so much for being here. Please be well. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.